All right, guys, welcome back. We have round two coming up, and we have a fantastic match ahead of you. And joining me on the desk is Shotgun. How's it going, dude? How you find the cup so far?
Doing great, and so far it's been amazing. Like that first round, so fun. Like the mill deck from Jokesy, the rush decks coming in, decks that we haven't seen in a cup for such a long time. It's so fun, and some of those matches were really, really close, to be honest.
It was pretty intense, yeah. We after we went for the recap with Cappuccino, we were saying there were very intricate little things that could have been done differently and would have changed the tide of the match completely. But very tense game. Before we go into our next match, the bracket has been updated, and I don't know if you have the bracket in front of you, but we already have a bounty claimed. Arianel taken out in round one. That is unheard of in the last few months. But
Ooh,
Palorn
yeah.
taking that game there.
Canada beating France. Now, I don't know if Poulon is from Quebec, but if he is, then it's French Canada beating France. Probably not, though. But still, yeah, Arianel, generally a person that goes very far in these tournaments. A lot of times top three. How many times did he manage to get there?
Oh, at least
I
three
can
times.
actually check.
3 to 4 times. He's won 2 monthly cups. He's
Yeah,
got
it's
second,
three
third.
times indeed.
Yeah, so he's done very well. So it's very surprising to see Arianel go out so early in
And
the
he won
tournament.
the last monthly cup. So yeah, big upset there. But then again, Plorn is a great player.
Yeah, one of the finest from Canada. Paperino falls to Ranma. Ranma, being a very strong player, very good at green yellow haste, but that doesn't exist anymore. So, well, as far as I know, at least I
You
haven't seen the
could
variations.
try to do it, but it's probably not worth it.
Strudel beating Heavy CC. That's a big win for Strudel there. Heavy CC being part of Team Equilibrium along with Lou, Modnik, Teddy. So yeah, very very big win there for Strudel. Aethelama beating Yotsuba. Aethelama's been in so many monthly cups now. It's nice to see Aethelama go forward and do well. Rizo getting defeated by S of Dawn. S of
Oh,
Dawn, very good player.
I noticed a little of a pattern here on at least on the left side, is that a lot of so far of the matches that are done, so far the ones that qualified through getting to the top eight have been defeated there.
Oh, just to point out now, Yotsuba unfortunately didn't make it in time, so Avalama went through on a disqualification.
Okay.
On the
Well,
right side,
still,
though, King Dan's, runner-up from last time, taking 3-2 over Yui. That was a close game for him, and same with Satyrus
yeah,
as well against Hunter.
indeed, some very close games here. And then we also see Minascaro against Fujang, also 2-3. Nightingale vs Imperia, with Imperia winning 2-3. Like, there are some really close matches here.
Man, Nightingale always just on the tip of the iceberg. He's ready to move off the iceberg into victory, but he always gets set back a bit. And Nightingale has always been a strong performer in Faeria. He's been with us for so long, and it's a little bit of a shame for him, I think, because I feel like he's a strong player, but just doesn't get the spotlight in the monthly cup because he gets these really tough opponents, and it's always really close.
Indeed. Now, one thing is that Teddy made it out of round one. He managed to get the win from Mayhem, which is also a very strong player. So, yeah, he finally gets it after the upset of last monthly cup where he lost in 3-2 against Scream. Still remember that match. It was so fun.
The Scream
But such a big
kryptonite
upset.
of Teddy.
Indeed.
Anyway, guys, we have an exciting match coming up for you. We have King Dan's going up against Satyrus in this round two game. So this is going to be a pretty good match. King Dan's has been one of the most dominant forces in all of Faeria's history. As Satyrus, always coming at the top with competitive play, but not quite getting that push he needs to get that big win.
Yeah, he's managed to qualify a couple of times for the monthly cup, but sadly only got to the third place one time, which was in the November 16 finals.
Yeah, there's...
However, King Dance, well, you might say he's got even worse luck because he got to the second times, like, what, 3 or 4 times?
Yeah.
And he only won the very first one, and that wasn't even when it was called the Monthly Cup. It was called something different.
That was the Go Faeria Clash.
The Go Faeria Clash, yeah.
Yeah, and he took out Life Coach all that time ago. And yeah,
Yep.
it's been a while since King Dance has had a Faeria, official Abracam event under his belt. He's done so well in ESL in the past. Just back-to-back victories at ESL, just taking the money like is not even an issue. But then when it comes to the Monthly Cup, he's always kind of stopped at second place.
Yeah, he's 2 times he got to second place. 1 time he got to third place. Like, I feel so bad for him because he really deserves to win. He's such a great player, and he just can't get there. Every time he's getting into those finals, he just barely gets beaten.
Yeah, it's always a tough game for Dan's. If it's not his teammate beating him, it's someone from Faeria Tail. It's very unfortunate, but maybe this is his tournament to shine.
Yep. Oh, maybe we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. And after this match, we got a little announcement, don't we?
Yeah, we got some surprises for you guys after this game, but you're going to have to see how King Dan's performs before we can go into that. So let's get into this game, guys. We have Cappuccino and Zologrim giving you guys the play-by-play. Take it away, guys.
Thank you very much. And yeah, join with me, Sologrim. Back at it again. How's it going, Solo?
Hey Cappuccino, I'm back with my favorite Canadian caster on the disc.
Favorite really Canadian?
Yeah, I mean you have to eke out your edges somewhere. Yeah, I'm really excited for this match, although obviously I'm a bit sad that German players are going to knock each other out. But I think we're pretty safe to assume it's going to be a good match because King Dance, doesn't need any introduction, and Saturas has been performing on ladder very strongly for a very long time. So I'm curious to find out if maybe this one will be the tournament friend to break through in tournament play as well.
Yeah, to start things off, it looks like actually pretty good hands for both players. Cypher's... Actually, I would have assumed you would keep Cypher's Wrath in your starting hand. I was a bit surprised to see that tossed. But King Dance with Water Lily, Triton Warrior, Spellroll, those are the 3 cards you're looking for. Satrith with the turn 1 play if he wants to go for Axe Grinder, and, red up against blue. What do you think?
I know it's been a point of discussion between dropping the Axe Grinder early or not. I personally always do it when I can because I really enjoy having that early and pretty sturdy collector out. Also 4/3 is a pretty solid stat line against blue because it can trade with most of his creatures, so I think it's a very solid start. But also, like you mentioned, on the other hand, King Dance won't be complaining about this start either. Although, seeing the Spellwell, what do you think about that?
Well, like always, it's a very fun card. Can be pretty polarizing, but it's actually interesting. We can see Satrus is more of a Attack Matters themed deck with the Firebrainer and Hate Seed in hand, and King Dance actually pulls off a Sunken Tower from the Spiral. So if he wanted to, he could have played the Sunken Tower on the neutral tile and actually just pulled the Axe Grinder in front of the Orb of Satrus, and you effectively deny 1 Faeria that way, and potentially even more than that, with just at least 1 toggle of the Sunken Tower. So a little bit surprised he didn't go for it, but maybe he's hoping just to maybe develop some higher cost cards.
I think he could have. He also has to pay for the Sunken Tower, obviously, so I'm not sure if it pays out in the long run, and he might be trying to save it for a more impactful turn where he gets to value trade somehow. I think overall he got decently lucky with the Spellware because both the Creation and the Sunken Tower are very solid cards in blue, and no bricks there yet, so I think he has a very strong selection of options in his hand at the moment.
Yeah, and very clever line coming out of King Dance just there. Decides to play around the Bomb Singer, says, okay, I want to develop my 4/4 Triton Warrior in the double collection spot, but I don't want it to get slingered off, and manages to avoid that nicely. And yeah, as you're mentioning, Creation is great in blue because you can Creation your Colossus once it's been discounted and then play it for just whatever the creation cost is. Or on top of that, you can Creation Archons that are triggered, so a lot of good targets.
Yeah, not to forget the old classic Creation on Aurora.
Yeah, certainly. And Satras actually with an amazing line there says, oh, you're going to play around Bomb Slinger? You can't play around the Fire Alley, Explore Mountain, Bomb Slinger line, and gets a lot of value there.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to include the fire elemental because we haven't seen it a lot because it's generally considered to be one of the weaker of the elemental cycle. But if you consider the matchups you might expect, especially in the first round of a tournament, I mean, against blue, fire element is actually very solid because if the opponent has frogs, you can probably just Cypher's Wrath them or something. And against anything else, it has a very strong stat line for its cost.
Yeah, in my experience, in just playing blue up against red, red is very hard to beat as a blue player when they have the bomb slingers because they ciphers your toads, they firestorm when you play too many creatures, and then they bomb slinger your 4/4 bodies. And I'm not sure how much different it's going to be with the attack matters themed. I'm not very experienced in this matchup with those cards, but it certainly looks like this is a decent position for Satras.
And we see the Crumbling Golem, which has been, I think, buffed after the last monthly cup. So this is the first cup where we can play it in the buff form. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
So definitely a card that makes the Angry Red archetype more interesting, I guess, because as we can see, for 5 Faeria, getting a 7/6 body is fairly strong. Although against cards, for example, like Battletoads, it's a bit on the weak side because then you can trade into it with one of the many 4 attack creatures that blue has at its disposal. But it still buffs the Firebringer, reduces cost on the hate seed and stuff like that. So it's definitely looking like a very solid card at the moment.
Yeah, I can expect this turn to go very long for King Dance. There's so many cards you have to be scared of in this matchup because now you have to be worrying about, okay, those Horsemasters in the enemy deck because that's an attack matters themed card. How do I play around Horsemaster? And we saw he actually took quite a bit to figure out his line, and you know, this does look to be like one of the strongest ways of doing it. It is a little bit unfortunate that the Archon that takes the damage because you would prefer the Warrior is the one taking the damage because maybe the Archon flips later. But with it being this early, I guess it's not that much of an issue.
Yeah, and I think Saturas will definitely not be sad about how this early game has been shaping up, because generally if you manage to get onto the board, especially if you play your red deck more in a control kind of style, which I think you want to do if you're against blue with the angry red, because once you get down your big Firebringers and free hate seed, you have a huge advantage, so you basically just need to survive and not fall behind too much in the early game, and I think he's achieved that, and arguably more if we're looking at the current state of the game.
Yeah, this is looking very good for Satras. With Hate Seeds already down to 3 Faeria, so that's already a 3 Faeria 4/4 when you want to play it. The Firebrain was a 4 Faeria 5/5, so already above curve, and you know, with lots of early creatures he can be playing to even get more value, and this is just going to snowball more and more as this game continues. Although King Dance is discounting the Wave Crash, in order for him to discount it again, he has to play within trading range, and it's not something he's going to want to do.
And I think one thing to note is Saturas playing the Firebringer fairly early, as like it's a solid creature, but it's not absolutely game breaking at the moment. But I think this is one of the signs of a strong player, that he doesn't get super greedy all the time and wants to keep the Firebringer in hand forever until it's like 15-15 or something. You have to see when it's more important to get pressure on the board right now, or when you want to wait for a larger payoff later on.
Yeah, that said though, it actually I think would have played around Ninja Toad, and it also would have played around Command better if you had just developed the Fire Alley instead. But I think he really wants to get that aggressive mountain, so he doesn't want to just waste the gift effect of Fire Alley making the mountain just beside his other mountain.
Yeah, I think especially against blue, it's always very important to get some kind of early or at least mid-game advantageous lands in where you can apply pressure in the long run, because otherwise he might be drawing into all those discounted Colossi in the late game and actually turn a disadvantageous board around. So I think if he goes for the mountain now, which we should expect, it might have paid off, although the Colossus is still pretty big at the moment, and we don't see the super elegant answer in Saturas' hand at the moment.
Yeah, and it looks like Satras is contemplating stepping down. Okay, he does. So one of the weaknesses to him just stepping directly down was that now Triton Warrior again with Command can get a nice trade in. The only punishment to that would be like the Ground Shaker. but Satras actually chooses just to completely kill off the Wave Crash.
Ninja Toad is a very good pickup here for King Dance. I think we can expect the double collect and jump probably, although or maybe develop 2 prairies to the left, collect from the left well, and then play the double collecting Toad for the triple collect. What do you think?
Yeah, this looks insane. That was a fantastic pickup. You know, normally you look at spending 2 Faeria to kill a 5/2 as not that great, but this is discounting all of the Colossus left in King Dan's deck. So there's still 2 more we'll find, and that's -1 Faeria cost on them, as well as being, you know, effectively a Cypher's Wrath for blue.
Yeah, and I think after it was looking fairly grim a couple of turns ago, it's been picking up a bit for King Dance again, although we still have to consider all the possible hate seeds and Firebringers that Saturas will still have in his deck that will keep getting cheaper as this game progresses.
Yeah, exactly. And there's not really any way for Satras to play around Ninja Toad, but what he can do is just Fire Rally and +1 play the Outlaw Ranger. Thinking of Hunted Outlaw because of that game of Fatigue, but yeah, just develop the Outland Ranger and the Fire Rally. Looks good.
I think it's fairly safe to say we probably won't see another Hunted Outlaw in this tournament for the rest. Although I wouldn't mind it. It's a fun card actually, but it's arguably not the most competitive. So it was really cool seeing it at least in the first round. And
Yeah,
does he step
like
forward? Sorry, does he step forward with his X Grinder now aggressively, or does he want to deny King Dance the opportunity to trade away the X Grinder?
The thing is, it allows your opponent just to make a lake, jump onto it, and then use a movement trick like Sunken Tower, push it into the wall, and then you have the Mystic Beast spot, whereas before you would have had to have double land. Well, no, I guess you didn't have to double land. There was no way to stop that. I guess by putting the Axe Grinder forward 1, it means the Mystic Beast spot is in a tile that can't reach face, so that's at least a slight advantage that Satras won't have to worry about getting counter-rushed as easily.
Yeah, although I'm not really sure if he has to worry about being counter-rushed at the moment.
Yeah, and probably better is to actually just push the Prairie and then make the lake, because then you have the charge line for the Archon.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Still though, Satura still has a couple of creatures and fairly solid control on the right side of the board, and after King Dance trades into the X Grinder, he still has the Archon, but I think he's still behind on board pressure overall, and also arguably the late game clock is ticking more in Satura's favor in my opinion.
Yeah, this is already starting to look very advantageous for Satras. You know, 4 Faeria 7/7, 1 Faeria 4/4, very, very strong cards.
I mean, 4 Faeria 7/7 or 4 Mana 7/7 have a history of being balanced in any kind of game, so it's always good to see them in any type. But I think we can expect the Firebringer to grow a bit more, arguably, because I don't think Satras needs to play it right now.
Yeah, one option he has is just playing the Crumbling Golem and then developing the Hate Seed. But I think I would rather see just Firebringer get played. He's going to go for the Crumbling, though.
I kind of like that play because it denies a double collect from King Dance, and it's also a ton of pressure while still keeping the option for the Hate Seed to trade into the Archon. And it's also, due to the charge as opposed to jump, the Archon often is much more restricted in where it can go as opposed to, for example, given the Triton Warrior.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's actually going to matter much with whether you went for the Firebringer or whether you went for the Crumbling Golem. It looks like Satras is just applying a ton of pressure either way. You know, King Dan's, one of his best lines is simply just to, you know, scoot up the Archon and then trade, and then pass. There's no real good lines there for him.
Yeah, but I mean, then you're looking at 7 damage to face next turn, and the steamroll of other red creatures that arguably might come from Satras' hand if he starts playing like the traditional Angry Red, like play 1 creature every turn and then pass and hope that it will be enough to overpower the opponent, which it probably will be at this stage of the game.
Yeah, I mean, one other line is you could try and stall by pulling the Outland Ranger Northwest one and then pulling the Crumbling Golem up a tile afterwards with a second Sunken Tower, but if you're investing so much into just moving his lands to delay one turn, it's not going to be efficient because you just have the board retaken. And it looks like copying the Outland Ranger for the Campfire. A line I didn't see, but plays heavily into Ground Shaker.
Yeah, if Saturas is even running Ground Shaker, I mean, we haven't seen it so far, and I imagine if he's going more heavily into the angry type of deck and not the more control-ish type that we've seen in the past, he might not even be running it.
Yeah, Saturas would have actually needed to have it in hand and then +1 play it, so that's still like not too much of a threat. However, King Dance with both Sunken Towers now could reach the Crumbling Golem with Archon next turn thanks to his clever play.
And I think basically the train of thought for King Dance has to be, there is absolutely no way that I'm going to come back into this game if I don't get any kind of collecting going. So he just goes all in, trying to assure that he gets at least some Faeria every turn, because he can't win the race if the opponent is double collecting every turn and playing creatures. So he will take a lot of damage, and most likely it won't be enough, but I think that's probably what he was going for.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you Campfire the Crumbling to hit for 8. It secures lethal setup a little bit better. Because it stops things like Battletoads from being able to help clear off the board.
Yeah, I suppose, although it's probably arguably a bit overkill either way, because basically King Dance would need double Frogify. I mean, he even has double Frogify in hand, he just doesn't have the Faeria and the creatures to clean up afterwards.
Yeah, and with a hit for 7 and a Fireburner set up as an 8/8, it looks like he's going to pass it over to King Dance, and King Dance not with any real great answers yet.
To be fair, not at this stage of the game, but in theory, we can kind of see the weakness of the Crumbling Golem, because if King Dance would have played one more creature, he already could have traded the Ninja Toad into the Crumbling Golem. So the reduction in HP does hurt after a turn or two.
Now I'm trying to figure out if there's any reason to be using Sunken Towers at the moment. What could you possibly do?
The question is, does he need to step down with this Outland Ranger and try and defend somehow? Because, but he can probably still use the Sunken Tower to get the Hunted Outer next. But I think we're going to see the lethal now anyway.
Yep, regardless, there's the lethal, and Satras, with this Attack Matters themed deck, is going to take game 1, and it's a matchup that's normally favored, I think, for the red combat, and looks to be favored for the Attack Matters as well.
Yeah, and I think Saturas played it pretty cleanly, knowing what his best shot at winning, not going aggressive through one side at the start, but instead going for the double collecting on both sides, buffing up his Firebringers and Hate Seeds. And I'm really interested to see what King Dance will face now to try and beat this Angry Red.
Yeah, it makes sense. This still could be a Wish deck, because I know in the past King Dance has played blue-green Wishes, so with the Fairy it's probably mono-green. Could still be blue-green.
Fairies, I think we can probably expect something in the vein of Runin's Presence, maybe? What do you think?
I don't know if we'll see Runin's Presence, just because it's probably too random. But you're right.
If you run fairies, you have to have at least half your deck should consist of events. Otherwise, it's so unlikely that they are going to trigger, and especially against red, which can theoretically get rid of it so easily by playing just the ground check. I really want to have at least a solid shot at them proccing early on.
Yeah, and Satras actually had the option to go up the same side, just explore Mountain Fire Alley to make the secondary mountain, and then you can double land and threaten Bomb Slingers on the 4th turn. Instead chooses to double land to start, and by doing this now, he lost the ability to even threaten Cypher's Wrath. Granted, with Fire Alley, he could have actually played it if King Dance opted to play this Fairy into it, but
yeah, I think we can expect the buffed X Grinder right now. which looks like a very solid play. And also one thing I'd like to point out is even though in theory it's like, okay, he's mono red, I'm going to bring mono green as a counter, but this angry red archetype actually has a much better late game than most of the other red decks, because if you manage to get to the late game halfway intact before the green deck overpowers you with big toughness creatures, you even have the very big Firebringers at the free hate seats, which actually might possibly turn it around. So we'll have to see how this plays out.
Yeah, that certainly was the case for a long time, but with green gaining Voice of Truth, the hate seeds always get the 0 cost 4/4 value, but Firebringer, sometimes you spend 4 Faeria on it and it gets voiced down to a 1/1, and that could be a way that King Dance manages to overpower him in the late game if it goes there.
Yeah, that's a very very fair point. I think if we see the voices, also potentially like healing up a lot of HP on the damage creatures for green, that can be a big swing for sure.
Yeah, and also Runin, now picked up for King Dance. Runin is an incredible card against almost any mid-range deck, because you put it on the same side they go up, you're constantly collecting on the other side, and every turn you just play Runin.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for them to get the ability to overpower Runin.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially the recently buffed version of Runin, which just snowballs to be the 1 Faeria reduction is 1 when you play it for the first time, but every time you play it afterwards, compared to the 6 Faeria it was costing before, it reduces another Faeria. So the more often you play it, the better it gets, even apart from the buffs it gets. So I think Saturas will hate seeing that Runin drop, and his best shot will probably be just trying to rush into King Dance's face as fast as possible, so he can't get insane value from the Runin.
Tetra picked up. Okay, so an insane draw, first of all, for King Dance. Finds the Feed the Forest, so he's able to flip the Fairy, but then he can feed on the Willow for that +4 Faeria of the initial cost of both cards. And now Fairy can be double collecting. He can Tetra the Wood Ellie to trade if he wants. He can just develop the Runin also. And this actually looks really difficult, because at first glance, it looks like just Stalker the 5/2, play Runin. But I'm really curious if he's going to go for a Tetra buff instead.
I mean, do you really want to play the Runin when it just gets killed by the Crumbling Golem? Although, technically, yeah, next turn the Crumbling Golem will die when you play another creature, so I think that would have been very solid. So maybe that's the play after all. Or does he play Tessera to buff the Wood Elemental?
Yeah, if the Stalker was played and the Runin was played, Crumbling would be a 7/4. So even if the Crumbling killed the Wood Ellie, it just means next turn when you summon a creature, the Crumbling dies. So you would have got value regardless, I think.
I think going for the Runin in either scenario is the correct play, because you want to start getting value of that Runin as quickly as possible, and also proccing the Fairy on the right is just so good at that point in the game, because now you have your flying free, very sturdy double collector on the right side that will keep generating. And now we see the ground shaker pickup from Saturas. Just 1 turn earlier, it would have been so good killing off the Fairy, which is now going to be a massive pain for him, I think.
Yeah, and Fire Ellie going to now Satras to start double collecting with the Axe Grinder, and he is scaling his Fireburners, so King Dance will need to eventually find a Voice of Truth, or maybe even overpower it with Runin. But with Tetra buff on the Fairy, it looks like King Dance is actually going to put him on a clock, because you can play the Tetra aggressive too.
That's very ballsy play for sure, but to be honest, yeah, this was the next turn kill me or die clock, so yeah, very heads up play from King Dance, and finishing this match much earlier than I would have expected at the start.
Yeah, very fast-paced game. Runin to deny any aggression, Fairy and Tetra at your back line to just threaten lethal over the next 2 turns, and rightfully Satras had no answer, so he threw out the concede.
So what does Saturas go for now?
Yeah, exactly. From Satras, I would imagine a blue deck. Blue is, commonly the answer to answer green, because you have your library to start getting your card draw, your Fairy ramp. They don't have commands to deal with it, because they usually run command in their blue deck. And so you're usually just allowed to snowball that way. And it looks like that's what he's going to go for.
And very interesting to see the Falcon Dive, because I think generally in ladder play, most players will probably go for Emperor's Command over Falcon Dive these days, but as we know, we can only play 3 copies of Emperor's Command. So this is actually like the spot where you might still want to run Falcon Dive, just because so you can, in that scenario, you can use the Emperor's Command in your other decks.
Yeah, I've personally tested around a lot with running 3 command, 1 Falcon Dive, just because I found that I still very often wanted 4 ping effects, or the ability to have 4 pings. So it could still be triple command and just the one of Falcon Dive.
And I'm also curious to see if Saturas is running a list with library or a more traditional blue jump style deck that can set up more quickly.
Yeah, the other curious thing is how many water Ellies, and if they run the 1 shell, do they go for the Spirals? We saw Spiral in some of the earlier games, but you know, it's a card that lately people have been starting to cut again because they want to refine more on getting that guaranteed library scaling by, you know, running a few more water Ellies.
And we do see the Mystic Beast pick up, which is not the greatest card at the moment because he doesn't have the water elemental or land movement effects at the moment to set it up. Also, the Battletoads, notably not the greatest early game collectors against Deepwood Stalkers, so I think King Dance won't be too heartbroken over the Battletoad play.
Yeah, and this looks good. Depending on where King Dance wants to put the fairy, he can play it and then feed the forest on his Willow if he wanted to get a chance at flipping it, and then afterwards play the Stalker. But it looks like he's actually going to hold off on playing feed. And
Yeah,
it's actually going to get punished here.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where Saturas will congratulate himself for including the Falcon Dive, which is an amazing play. And we get to see the animation, which Shotgun mentioned earlier, which does look very neat indeed.
Yeah, that Falcon's swooping down to take out that fairy, and, you know, it's a tiny fairy. Falcon, you know, just going to go ahead and eat it, and, you know, King Dance goes for the feed line now. Has the Stalkers to stop the double collect from on board. However, we can see Satras with the Ninja Toad is actually going to have a fantastic line afterwards, you know. 2 Faeria, double collect.
Yeah, I mean, still, though, what's better than 1 Deepwood Stalker against Battletoads, 2 Deepwood Stalker? So I think either way, even without even with the Ninja Toad, it's still a very solid line of play because he gets to establish presence on the. Basically, he has Battletoads now, and the opponent doesn't have anything left. So for a couple more Faeria. So yeah, but the Ninja Toad is just arguably the best pickup you could have in hand at the moment for Saturas, because it also buffs his Colossi, and he even gets to establish the early Mystic Beast with the buff. So yeah, it's looking like a very close match, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, King Dance kind of has his creatures in a swapped position. You know, you kind of wish your Willow was where your Stalker is instead. That way you can buff up your Willow and attack with it, but Grove Crawler picked up actually might allow that in the next couple turns. Doesn't embrace Fairy again.
Yeah,
not respecting it at all.
Yeah, and I was about to say King Dance probably won't be feeling very good about dropping his fairies unbuffed against this blue, which has already shown Ninja Toad and Falcon Dive, and arguably is running command or whatever else. So, and I think he's probably going to get punished again. Although, do you actually play the Ninja Toad to kill the fairy? Because it will get traded into afterwards.
I'm actually confused because he could have double end instead of hitting face, and that way you could collect and then play the Phantasm aggressively. You know, Mystic Beast just jumps up a tile onto the prairie so it can still threaten face, and then the Ninja Toad jumps into the wall to collect, and you just Phantasm where the Mystic Beast was. So you have a 5/5 in the bottom right, 5/5 in the top left.
About him going for the draw instead of playing the Mirror Phantasm anyway. I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, it was a bit weird, and it looks like he'll probably get punished because the 2/2 can hit in, and then you can embrace, teleport the other 2/2 to then be a 4/6 to finish it off. Or you can just go for Runin. It looks like that's what he's going to favor.
Runin, not the best card against blue generally, but with a reduction in cost, you actually don't lose out as much as you used to in the past when it was costing like 6, getting buffed, or costing 8. I think it's a much more safe play even against blue right now, but you still would have preferred something with 5 attack, I think, like a Grove Guardian or something, which we haven't seen in King Dance's deck so far, I think.
Yeah, a little bit surprising that he goes for the Frogify right away. I think it's normally better to Frogify on the second copy that's played, because the second one is still a 5 Faeria play, and the first one is actually an understated creature for the cost. So usually, I would imagine you want to actually kill it when you can on board.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think I would have gone just for the trade with the Mystic Beast, because as we can see, King Dance will still be able to buff and kill off the Mystic Beast next turn with the Stalker, and generally you can expect green to have any kind of buffs by the mid game. But the Colossus, as always, applying a ton of pressure in the fairly early mid game, so we'll have to see what King Dance will do against it, having lost his Runin pretty quickly.
Oh, and with triple buff picked up, he can afford all the cards in his hand. He can actually triple buff the Living Willow to 3, 5, 7 power and kill off the Colossus. Now, is that the best way of doing it, or do you just teleport a 2/2 to kill the 3/2? And then have the other one kill the Mystic Beast? It's probably better just to teleport the 2/2 to trade.
Yeah, I think you really don't want to invest your whole hand into killing buffing one creature to be a giant size against blue, because as we can see, even if needed, Satras would still be able to play Mirror Phantasm next turn, most likely. So I think going for value trades and spreading out your power over creatures is safer than investing all into one.
Yeah, okay,
but...
so King Dance lines up Ninja Toad, but the opponent's already played 2 Ninja Toads. Some blue jump decks only run 2, so the probability of him having another one was very slim. And Satras goes for the Phantasm instead of just developing another Wave Crash, and this is actually going to line up any buff from green to get a value trade here.
To be fair, I'm not sure if it's a value trade, because you still... I mean, the Ruin's Guidance wouldn't be a value trade. With the Embrace, it arguably is. So, as we can see now, maybe it wasn't the best play. I think... I'm not so sure why Satras prefer to play the Mirror Phantasm over the second Wave Crash, because once you have pressure on one side of the board with the blue deck, I think it's always very solid to try and keep it up there, especially if you have like these insane cheap big HP and attack creatures like Colossus in hand.
Yeah, and this is actually suddenly looking very difficult for Satras. He wasn't able to find a library to get that snowballing, and he wasn't able to keep up the momentum because he went for the Phantasm line, so green is actually just starting to retake the board, and this is where it really starts to snowball for the green player.
Yeah, although to be fair, the Colossus is still a very solid creature to drop next to your own well and establish well control against green. And we have to keep in mind that King Dance already played quite a few of his buffs, so I don't think we'll have to expect to see that many in the next couple of turns. Although he's down to 12 cards already as well, so he has been shifting through much more of his deck than Satras has so far, and been using these Grove Callers to great effect again, as we can see here.
Yeah, really solid line. And Satras able to develop the Mystic Beast. King Dance would need double buff at least to be able to threaten it, so very unlikely with the amount of buffs we've already seen him play. But where are the Thyrene Golems and the Verderins?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. Maybe he's been drawing weirdly, but he's also, for example, he's not been showing the Grove Guardians, so maybe he's just gone for a different route. One thing I'd like to give attention to is that Satras going for the +1 Faeria, I think, is absolutely the best option at this stage of the game. We see many players going for draws, just trying to find cards, but I mean, he has cards he wants to probably play already in hand, and I think it's best to, if you are behind on board, you need that Faeria to get back onto the board. And now we see the Tyrant Golem, so they were just at the bottom of the deck, I suppose.
Yeah, and wondering now if he's going to teleport the Grove. No, he's not going. Is he going to hit? So I was thinking he would play the Grove Color to teleport it to be free of the Mystic Beast. One of the other lines he could have gone for is just collect feed on the Grove Color and then play the Wood Ellie and Guidance it. And Guidance to Wood Ellie would have been a 5/6 to contest the Mystic Beast.
Yeah, very interesting. And what do you do in Satyrus's position now? What do you do against the Faeria Golem? Do you just play the Mirror Phantasm to cut its HP and like double trade into the buff Grove Caller?
With how many Stalkers have been played and the fact that it's really hard to afford Falcon Dives in green, not a lot of people include it. I would assume that having a 1-life creature is completely fine. Because you're not really worried about Stalker. We've already seen a couple of those, and Phantasm on the 5/10 seems like solid value. So yeah, I would just look at Phantasm the 5/10, double hit into the Grove Caller.
And where would you drop the Mirror Phantasm? On the left side to contest the Stalker, or on the right side to keep the pressure going?
Though you could draw first, because if you find something like a command, you can just straight up one-shot the creature, which might have been interesting to go for.
He hasn't done either, I think, with this power wheel, and his time is running out. Okay, he just goes for the board swarm.
Wow, and Stalker picked up actually would have been a punish, but
and the buff. Not great targets for the Stalker at the moment.
Yeah, the Stalker doesn't really have great targets, but Grove Caller is going to be amazing here, as he's able to teleport the other Grove Caller to get the value trade on the 4/4 if he wants to.
Yeah, these Grove Callers have been doing work keeping King Dance in the game. I think it's still too early to say who will most likely be coming out ahead, but we have to keep in mind that King Dance's deck is growing very thin at this stage of the game. He's already down to like 6 cards, so he kind of has to close out the game or he will just run into fatigue.
That said, there is still 2 Tharian Golems that we can assume are still in King Dance's deck, so those are going to be 2 really sturdy creatures against Satrus. But where is Satrus's libraries? Is he not running them? Did he cut it completely from Blue Jump, I'm wondering?
I mean, it depends on how many libraries you want to run. I mean, I've traditionally run only 2 because sometimes if you get one out early, it's very strong, but you don't want them when you're defensive because you're already under pressure and you can't keep them safe, and you don't want them when you already have one. So if he's just running 2, he might just have been a bit unlucky. I mean, he's not even through half his deck yet, so maybe they are in the bottom half, we don't know. I think it's fairly safe to assume that if he's running Water Elemental, most likely he will be running the libraries, because I think otherwise he would just go for more efficient creatures instead of the Water Elementals.
Yeah, fair enough. And, King Dan's going to get another Stalker value trade, as the Stalker's going to eat up one of the Toads, and the 4/3 can eat up the other Toad, and just have the Willow taunt up that 5/1, which is going to be amazing.
Yeah, and with the Mirror Phantasm being taunted, if he goes for that line, Satrus won't be able to play the Mirror Phantasm, which would save his damage Mirror Phantasm. So could be a very strong line for King Dance.
Yeah, both Toads killed off, just the Phantasm left alive, and a 1/7 to perfectly trade in.
Oh, the Sunken Tower! Sunken Tower pickup, but it might just be too late because as it looks at the moment, King Dance might be able to close this out just in time before running out of cards with this deck.
Okay, and Campfire now picked up for Satrus, so I don't think Satrus is actually running libraries at all. It looks like he's just playing one of the older style Blue Jump decks with, the 2 Campfire and the 2 Falcon Dive, it looks like.
to be fair, it might have just bitten him in the bum in this match, because especially against green, you really want those libraries in the early game, because it's nearly impossible for them to deal with it if they don't get some kind of growth collar action or draw into a command, which you can't expect to be in every deck. So yeah, might have been good to have included the libraries, because as it is right now, I think Satras might not be able to bring back this match.
Yeah, King Dance is definitely in complete control of this match. Now able to +1 Faeria as well, get the 5/10 to start pressuring a clock. You know, King Dance is on only 3 cards left, and he's on 12 life, so once fatigue starts ticking, it will ramp up quickly against King Dance, who's already so low. And Ninja Toad plus Campfire is able to kill off the Wood Ellie, but it's not enough to go face or anything. And that is the last Ninja Toad too, worth pointing out.
Yeah, I think outside of shenanigans like drawing into Radiance while being on very low amount of HP, there's still a fairly low chance for Satras to make a comeback in this, especially if you're looking at the insane amount of pressure that King Dance has on the board.
Yeah, and for King Dance, exactly what you want is what you just picked up. You find your Tetra. Once you have control of the board, this is going to help threaten a much shorter clock on the opponent. I'm trying to figure out if it's lethal setup with the buff.
Yeah, I think it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's lethal next turn, and I don't see any way for Satras to stop it. Frogify, still 5. Okay, so Frogify will stop it, because that'd be 10 damage setup, but that's just a losing play, because if you Frogify, you just die in the next 2 turns anyway.
Yeah. Like I said, unless he's like picking up Radiance next turn, which might even still not be enough to bring it back. Yeah, and that's the second win with that mono green deck from King Dance.
Yeah, so the deck that you would normally play to counter it, granted, I don't know if it is even a counter if you don't run Library, because green has so many efficient ways of dealing with the blue tokens and blue bodies now. But yeah,
that's what I've been wondering as well.
Satras now forced into, what would it be, a green deck or a yellow deck? Looks like it's going to be the green mirror.
Oh, good old mono green mirror, good times. Although it's a bit more interactive these days with the addition of the movement effect and the Deepwood Stalker. So also I'm interested to see if Satras has maybe brought a different type of deck. I may probably not bringing the fairies, for example, that King Dance has, even though they are probably pretty good in the mono green mirror.
Yeah, it's going to really depend on if King Dance can flip them the turn he plays it, because you do have to still worry about Deepwood Stalkers. There are now cards ran in like most green decks that can punish a fairy that's played unflipped. And Voice of Truth as well is a very strong card at setting a fairy back to a 1/1 after it did flip, so there are some counter cards.
Yeah, the first Voice of Truth we've seen, so I think King Dance doesn't seem to be running them. So probably not afraid of these big buff creatures or helping the HP on his own creatures, but he goes for the 2 damage. And this is one of the downsides of the Stalkers. You can't choose to not fight when you play them. For example, if the opponent just has a 4/4 creature, basically you can't play it because it would just be 2 damage to face. So they are generally very solid, but not all the time. But the second one probably will get the job done in this scenario, so he will not be very sad about picking that one up.
Just a quick correction though, you actually can cancel it. It is a gift effect that can be canceled, but you know, both of those were definitely high value, getting to Stalker fight the Wood Ellie and finish it off now.
Okay, thank you for pointing out my new mistake, Cappuccino Sensei. Yeah, obviously it's a gift effect, so you can cancel gifts. That's a fair point. I was kind of thinking it was like a different kind of keyword altogether.
Well, some you can and some you can't. This one in particular you can cancel.
It's a very early Tethra from King Dance to contest this Verduran Force, but the Falcon Dive is pretty big, shutting down the collection for King Dance on the right side of the board.
Yeah, I was wondering if Satras was going to be able to run Falcon Dive in this deck because he had it in his blue deck, but it looks like it was maybe just 1 or 2 in the blue.
Oh, and the preemptive Tefra gets punished really hard with the Voice of Truth by Satura. So, if you're ever thinking about pre-buffing against the green deck with Tefra, this play right here is one of the reasons you might want to not do it.
Yeah, this is certainly not looking great for King Dans at the moment. However, with Tethra being a flying creature, it might just be the case that King Dans eventually flies into the middle, has multi-buffs, and then threatens like a multi-buff to face or getting a favorable trade. That said, Satras is going to start rushing in because he's certainly aware of that threat.
Yeah, and double Therian Golem in hand. These are just so incredibly solid. King Dan's picking up his own, but this 9/11 Verdurant Force is a massive threat, which will take multiple creatures from King Dan's to get rid of. Although on the other hand, you do have the Runin,
Yes.
which can put out a lot of value if you manage to survive before you can play it multiple times.
Yeah, Runin the perfect draw for King Dans because you want to set up a creature that's able to just hold the aggression from Satras, and Runin's perfect because while you're collecting on the right side, you can just +1 play Runin over and over again, and it will just eventually get to the point where Satras can't overpower it. And on top of that, King Dans finds a way to get his Tethra to stay alive and get that favorable trade. So this is going to start looking incredibly rough for Satras if he doesn't find a Stalker to finish off Tethra.
Yeah, either Stalker or Falcon Dive would get the job done. Or he's just going to, and he gets the Stalker to finish Tethra. That's very solid. So I think it's still anyone's game, but he really needed to get rid of his Tethra right now.
Yeah, with Runin on the board now, he has to actually taunt it up and start threatening a clock because you can't outvalue Runin after like the 4th death. It just becomes impossible to deal with, and so Satras recognizing that says, okay, time to all in. I gotta go for this.
At least what you can do is you can kind of reset the buffs playing a Voice of Truth, because as far as I'm aware, if you reset it once, if it will just start anew again if you get it to your hand, or do you know exactly how this interaction works?
No, you'll reset it to a 4/4, but when it goes back to your hand, it'll buff it as if it wasn't toned back. So if it was a 6/6 body when you played it, it'll return to your hand as an 8/8, even if it was voiced.
Oh, okay, that's pretty brutal then. So, yeah, you can reset it on the board, but you can't reset the counter. That's pretty rough then. Yeah, it makes sense as well, because otherwise it would work with Hunting Vision and stuff like that. So, yeah. Like you said, Satura's finding the most likely chance of a win here is getting aggressive, but I mean, the Oakling pickup with feet and no other creature in hand, that's a bit rough.
This actually looks kind of funny, you know. Satras running the Oakling feed, so the massive amount of buff that gets punished by voice, but then he's also running voice, and King Dans isn't, and Satras was the one that got value with voice, so kind of ironic there. But yeah, no creature in hand currently, so he's gonna have to wait a turn. But we haven't seen voice from King Dans. We saw him almost deck out, so it looks like Satras is going to get tremendous value with that Oakling feed.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that King Dans is not running voice, because he's been down to like 2 cards, I think, in the last match. So basically it's like the value race at the moment between Oaklings versus Runin getting bigger. So at this point of the game, I think it looks more favorable to King Dans with the Runin, but we'll have to see what Satras can make happen with the Oakling.
Ooh, I don't know if you want Wood Ellie to get buffed. This is tough because you have to pressure your opponent fast, but he's got at least 14 damage locked up in that small area. So if you Wood Ellie to create the forest in front of the Orb of King Dans and then feed on the Oakling, you could drop a 12/12, but is it enough damage?
Yeah, and this is a play I pretty much agree with, because if you think back to the old Runin that got reduced, or even the one before that, which was a bit too weak to see play, but generally the number one rule when playing against Runin is try to not kill her and play at the other side of the board before she gets massive. So don't just bash her head in and kill her over and over again so she gets bigger and bigger, but just apply pressure on the other side of the board. And as we see now, it hasn't even died once. So it's not like she's going to be massive if she comes out again. And Satras has the 12-12 on the other side of the board. So King Dance has to, find some kind of movement effect to get her back into play, which he obviously manages to do beautifully. And now he'll just start playing her every turn, I think we can expect.
Yeah, this is where Satras is going to be hoping to have a movement of his own, some way to get to the other side of the board again. However, it is still a little bit expensive, and wow, Tiki Totem picked up in the hand of Satras, not a card that's commonly ran.
And a ton of buffs, so we are looking at the moment if Satras would be able to find like a removal for the Wood Elemental and a movement like a Growth Collar of his own, it would technically be lethal because King Dance is already down to 15.
I actually want to point out something really quick though. Satras made a mistake by not attacking with the Verduran. All you would do by not attacking is you allow your opponent to collect or potentially have a better line.
Yeah. Because
no matter what, the 6/6 is going to return to King Dan's hand and get replayed if he wants to. You don't deny him from being able to sack off his rune and play it on his turn. So all you did was give him bonus Faeria.
Yeah, absolutely, and give him options. Generally, I think it's the only line where you might want to consider such a play is if you consider your opponent to be a strategically weak player who might not find the correct line, but if you expect him to trade into the Verdurant Force 100% of the time, it's always better to just trade yourself in order to not give him more options.
Yeah, and trying to look through this line, Satras manages to find the Grove Crawler, so he needs to and Runin picked up. Okay, so actually, Runin Battle might delay this game a ton because he can actually just step back with the Verduran and play the Runin.
And this is such a great play. Gets to double collect, gets rid of the unbuffed Fairy, and gets to drop his own Runin and start the Runin race of who can play an insanely high value creature more often.
Yeah, forget what I said. Your opponent's low. You want to all in him? Just all in him with Runin. He can't kill it to defend because then it just grows.
The double Runin mirror match. Who would have expected to see this last month?
Okay, so King Dance has 6 Fairy, right? He can collect from the left side wall to go to 7, +1 for 8. He can't afford to Grove Caller and replay a new Runin. But one of the lines I see... Actually, you could go to 9, which is enough. So if you teleport Runin onto the forest and collect the northwest well, that's enough to finish off Verduran and then +1 play Runin.
Yeah, it looks like the best play, and King Dance is definitely going for it. So he's kind of ahead in the race, but at least he can't get rid of the Satras' Runin this turn.
Yeah, and this is just so good because you have the 5/1 taunting it up, so it's so unlikely for Satras to have any more Falcon Dives because I believe we saw 2 in the blue, correct me if I'm wrong. And if that's the case, yeah, Satras is going to struggle to really find the damage to close this out.
But we haven't seen the commands from Satras yet, did we?
No, I don't think we've seen commands yet, so it could be in the green deck to try and help the matchup against blue. Stalker could also be a pickup.
Yeah.
Willow getting picked up means he can stall the enemy Runin, but it's still not what you want. I guess in this case you would embrace it because it lives to the attack of the Runin.
Going for the Verdurant Force instead on the other side of the board.
Yeah, I am a little bit surprised by that, but it's actually interesting because Satras' Runin will die, meanwhile King Dan's one stays alive. So Satras next turn gets to develop a 8/8 coming out.
Yeah, it's definitely one interesting thing about this Runin mirror match is that technically you want your Runin to die so you can replay it instantly, also for the repositioning that it affords you. So by not having it killed, it's stuck on the other side of the board, so we'll have to see if King Dance manages to find another Grove Call or something to get it back into play as Sep.
Yeah, and just a correction there, Satras one is a 6/6. so many runins getting played, hard to keep track, and 6-6 is not going to be enough to really threaten that much or that fast of a clock. One line I'm looking at is you can runin below the ferry and then dash it towards the grove crawler and then just buff it on the following turn. But if the enemy has a buff, it means he can kill it off.
Yeah, I think Saturas at this point is really wishing he had included more ping effects. Yeah, he's going for the line you mentioned to try and keep up the pressure, and he can start mowing through some of these low H attack creatures on the right side of the board with his Verdurant Force, which is always very solid. But this is just an all-out green against green slugfest, like fat creatures all over the board, killing off each other, buffing each other, so it's fun in its own way, I think.
Yeah, I was about to say, actually, one buff doesn't do it thanks to the Tiki Totem, but he managed to find Stalker and then a double or a second Embrace, so lots of different ways of dealing with this Runin now.
But do you really want to invest all your buffs and your Deepwood Stalker to kill off the Runin just so it gets played again the next turn? I think you might be looking to kill off the Verdurant Force instead, because once that's gone, it's gone. It's not going to come out again even bigger.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that killing the Verdurant is a high value play, and then you just taunt up the Runin. Uses the Wood Ellie to, or uses the Fairy to kill the Verdurant instead of using the Fairy to taunt. This is really risky, because if Satras has buff and taunt, it's so hard to deal with this.
Yeah, I mean, he can technically kill off King Dance's Runin with his Deepwood Stalker right now and go face and threaten lethal next turn. But he's kind of has to prevent King Dance from being able to play a taunt creature of his own, and I don't think he can do that. Oh, interesting. The buff from the Tiki Totem to get rid of that fairy.
Yeah, he can hit face and forest blocked with Willow now, and that is lethal setup.
Yeah, it's lethal setup for sure, but as we can see, King Dance has even actually 2 Willows in his hand, so he will be able to stall out himself.
This is scary for King Dance, though, because King Dance has a very light deck in terms of the card weight, and he's already played his Tethra, so King Dance is going to be drawing into relatively cheap cards, whereas Satras is drawing into Oakling with potential feed and into a bigger creature, so unless Runin starts happening for King Dance's value, this is going to look really one-sided over the next few turns.
Also, we have to keep in mind that both players have depleted a majority of their deck already, so if it goes to fatigue, and we haven't seen life game from either of these players' decks, so King Dance being down to 8 HP and the card down might mean he actually runs into fatigue, so he has to like apply pressure now, and that's what he's going for. Threatening the 2-turn clock on Saturas now.
Oakling picked up not exactly what you want, and he is going to be able to block the Fairy, but the Willow's going to be able to taunt it up.
And the 3rd Willow as well. I think we might be looking at very close GG from King Dance here, because I don't see at this time how Saturas will be able to deal with the 10-10 Runin at his face.
Yeah, with 2 taunts in hand, it looks pretty grim. If it was just 1, maybe you could think a Guidance would give you another turn. You know, just play the Runin's Guidance, heal up to 15, and move out of lethal range. But Wood Ellie and Fairy is going to set up lethal even after a Guidance heal.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's GG. What a slugfest! Very entertaining game. And I think in the end, being the first to play the Runin might just have been what turned the scales into King Dance's favor.
Yeah, that said, though, there were some other lines that Satras could have done to try and go aggressive even more early on. He held his feed on the Foist that wasn't collecting at the time in the top right, and then he ended up investing into lands to get it collecting, whereas he could have just built a little bit more aggressive with his lands. down the left side, and I feel like it probably would have been a bit easier for him in that case. But that said, very well piloted from King Dance, managed to get a lot of favorable trades in that matchup.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think it wasn't an easy matchup to play, especially in the mid to late game when there was so many creatures around and so many potential buffs and plays that you could have been doing. So it takes a lot of experience to always find the most favorable one for you. And I think King Dance has proven once again why he's considered to be one of the best Faeria players at this time or any time.
Yep, and with that, we're going to send it back to the desk to see their thoughts and comments on that match. So take it away, Aqua, and I believe it's Shotgun on the desk as well.
All right, guys, I am joined by Shotgun the Relentless. What do you think of that match, Shotgun? Or shall I call you Runin?
Yeah, I turned out the Runin hat just for this, because that last match was just a Runin versus Runin battle, and in the end, King Dance's Runin was just the better Runin.
Yeah, Runin's really picked up pace within the competitive community. It's been a pretty much an unstoppable force in some matchups. I know Crackthorn absolutely hate Runin. Like, Runin early game against Crackthorn is just murder for them. And of course we saw how powerful Runin and Tephra was against that angry red. So yeah, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, I did make some notes. Let me go to the previous page, because the first match was pretty much, Ceteris got the early aggression on. There was one moment when King Dance had that little comeback with the Ninja Toad. He could somewhat stabilize, but yeah, the problem with Red Rush is it's got so many value creatures, and Ceteris just put down those creatures, gained more board control and Faeria advantage, and just closed out the game pretty quickly. And in the second game, well, Green versus Red Rush, yeah, that Runin did work. And but also the Smork Tephra that suddenly turned the game around, like, oh yeah, I won as green now because of that giant buff. And the third game, blue. How did King Dance manage to win with a green versus blue matchup?
Yeah, it's not very common green wins that matchup, simply because Frogify is a thing, Phantasm's a thing, so any kind of big threat that comes down, you can just deal with it very easily. Yeah.
To be honest, I think that matchup was mostly won by these all the spiders that were eating the toads constantly. And after that, the buffs came, and yeah, blue has good removal with the Frogifys, but you only have maximum of 3 Frogifys in your deck, and after that, Mirror Phantasms still leaves you with 5/5, so those don't work that well against it either. So yeah, King Dance just managed to put up the pressure and won that game. And that final game, well, you just saw it. That was just a giant Runin battle.
I mean, one thing to consider about Dan's deck in the blue matchup is his green. It doesn't really pack like all the traditional big green guys. It has Thorian Golems, but it didn't have Verdant Force, it didn't have Grove Guardian. So what are you realistically Frogifying? Fairies, spiders?
Exactly. It was mostly based around buffs, around those Runin commands and embraces. So yeah, there weren't that many targets indeed for those Frogifys, and that's how he managed to win the game.
Yeah, it was interesting to see green, take a win from blue. Traditionally a bad matchup, but Dan's deck building allowed him to navigate around one of blue's greatest strengths, which is the transform effects. If you haven't got anything worthwhile transforming, then blue is not going to be able to play as well, especially if you have these little spiders getting super powered up, like we saw against the Colossus, against the Phantasms. It could be pretty tough for them, but yeah, well done to Dan. He's going to continue going on. He's done pretty well, and let's take a look at the bracket. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah, let's do that.
So we have all of the round 2 matches pushed through, so we can see exactly who has moved on into round 2. We saw Polo and Ranma. Alva ended up taking Sweetie down 3-2. That must have been a very intense game for those two. Both are very good players. Sunkichi on the left-hand side as well. A monthly cup top 4, going strong. going against Strudel next match. What about the right side?
Yeah, so we, as we've seen, we got King Dance taking down Yui and now taking down Satras. And we got Salugi taking down SKC. Oh no, SKC taking out Salugi actually. SKC being, I believe, one of the people that got voted in. So that's very nice. However, he got eventually got stopped by Killing Time by KT. KT doing actually really well this tournament.
Oh, I don't have this version of the bracket. Just bear with me a minute, guys.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
Spoilers!
just refreshed it. So.
Yeah, but this has all happened, so technically not spoilers,
It all
guys.
goes
I
so
thought it
fast.
had updated, but yeah. Okay, so here we go. We'll take another look. So Alva actually beat Gelgoog, as you were saying. Eighth Alarm taking down S of Dawn 3-0. And where were we? KT beating SKC?
Yeah, SKC beating Salugi, but being stopped by KT. So KT doing really well this tournament. And then Fujang taking out Minakro, but being stopped by his by the other Frenchman called Imperia, also one of the top Faeria players. And then Teddy managing to beat Modnik.
Yeah, Teddy and Modnik, unfortunately, teammates having to battle it out there. But Teddy comes out on top. I think he was probably quite hungry for blood this monthly cup, considering what happened in the last monthly cup. But yeah, fantastic performance from the players so far. We're actually going to go to a quick break, and then we'll be back with some really cool stuff for you. So me and Rooney are going to bounce out, and we'll be back very soon.
Discover the Adventure Pouch Oversky, featuring a first-of-its-kind co-op campaign. Team up with either friends or powerful Faeria characters and discover a ton of new content, including more than 30 new cards. Join now to experience the Emperor's daily challenges and reap exclusive rewards. Explore the Oversky and reap the rewards today.